Timothy Taylor's Landlord Dark.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. I've got one here from the People's Republic of Yorkshire, and it is the Timothy Taylor Landlord Dark. Some of you may recognise this or may have known this under the name of Ram Tam. This was changed in 2019. And according to Timothy Taylor, it was because of the low beer sales of Ram Tam. So what they've decided to do is rename it Landlord Dark, as Landlord is, quite rightly so as well, a multi-award winning, very nice. They call it a pale ale, so I'm just going to go with that. It's one of them beers that is really, really drinkable. I've reviewed it, I think, twice on the channel. I revisited it. And I do remember a drunken night trying to review it, and I just couldn't get my fucking words out, and yeah, I had to revisit it. But I do remember on each occasion it being lovely. I've had it loads of times in the pubs. On draft, there is a pub down the road that occasionally gets it in. When it does, I'm drinking that all night. I love the stuff. It is a fantastic beer. Ram Tam, or Landlord Dark, is a new one for me. You just cannot get this down here. Now, I don't know about these low sales that they're talking about, but I have to say I never saw Ram Tam or I wouldn't have seen Landlord Dark because they changed the name in 2019 last year, but I never saw Ram Tam down here. You just don't get certain beers from up north down here, which is a real shame. The good ones you do, like Old Peculiar for example. A lot of the Black Sheep stuff you get down here as well, but the Timothy Taylor stuff, the only ones I've seen is the Landlord and the Boltmaker. And Boltmaker is another one that is really, really good from this brewery. And there's a reason their beers are good. And I just want to go into that with you for a while, just to, you know, when I talk about quality British beer, and, you know, it used to get a bad rap saying, oh, you know, it was the Camera, Socks and Sandals and Beard Brigade that were trying to keep it alive, etc. But what you've got to remember is this is a great British brewing tradition. And yeah, the craft beer industry has taken off massively. It's changed the way beer is viewed and the way it's consumed forever. I don't think there's no way of going back. But I do think this kind of stuff is getting sort of left behind, certainly by the younger generations. But anyway, that's by the by. They've got a lot of history, this brewery. They've been going since 1858, and they originate from a place called Keighley, which is in Yorkshire, as if you didn't know. And it is one of them breweries that they just get things right. They remind me of Adnams, they remind me of Shepherd Neame, and they remind me of Fuller's. That consistently good quality brewer. And the reason for that is, well, a lot of the reason for that is the ingredients that they use. Now, I can't really comment on other breweries, but Timothy Taylor do use good ingredients. And they only use one type of barley, and that is Golden Promise barley, which is really expensive. That is more commonly associated with whiskies rather than beer, hence the reason it's expensive. But there's a reason it's expensive, is because it tastes good. And I like that as well. And they do carry on the trend of using spring water. They've got their own spring. They're based in a place called Knoll Spring, and I think they've even got a beer called Knoll Spring, but it's named after the well, the artesian well that's been dug in the brewery, and that's where the water comes from. It's fresh spring water, so that's sort of in keeping with what the Bavarians do. They always make a point of brewing with fresh spring water. A lot of German brewers do it, in fact, and they make a big point of announcing that they use fresh spring water, which is in contrast with some of the stuff in Burton-on-Trent, which is a water that has got quite a high mineral content, and it does flavour the water or season the water as it's known in the trade. Another good thing about Timothy Taylor's is they use whole leaf hops. Now what does that mean, whole leaf hops? Well, whole leaf hops means it is the whole hop. It's not hop pellets, it's not hop extract, it is the actual hops. Now that's quite expensive as well to do that. There's all sorts of things that try and attack hops, like fungus, etc., and to try and keep the hops fresh, you know, that's a challenge. If it's hop extract or hop pellets, you don't have to worry so much about that. But Timothy Taylor use whole leaf hops, which I think is excellent, and the product is a good beer. It sounds like there's no corners being cut on this, so that's good. And of course that's all used in this. They use some interesting hops which I'll go into when I do the beer facts, and they also use some other interesting ingredients which I'll also get onto as well. So let's stop gassing about this lot and let's get this investigated. .500ml bottle, 4.1%. Not a new beer, but it's got a new name, and Landlord Dark is how it's known now. I'll call it Ramtam, Landlord Dark, whatever. The two names are interchangeable. It is the same beer, and as I say, it's simply been rebranded because of the poor sales. They did trial it in pubs up north, and just to see what the customer feedback was. Whether they've done the right thing by renaming it or not is anyone's guess, but you'll have to wait and see. I'm not going to pass judgment on that. Anyway, the malts in this are, as I said, Golden Promise, and the hops are Fuggles, Styrian Goldings and Goldings. As I say, they're whole leaf hops. Now you all know what the Goldings hops, what flavours they give off, and Styrian Goldings are quite similar. But the Fuggles hops are a typical British hop. You get them in a lot of dark beers and a lot of top fermented British beers as well, because they are an excellent hop if used wisely. I'm sure this lot have used them wisely as well. Rich, smooth, dark ale. That's what they've decided to call it. 1858 championship beer. Yeah, Ramtam did win quite a lot of awards. As I say, there is no difference to this. It's simply been rebranded. I'm just looking on the back of it, and it's got the tasting notes. I'm not going to give you the tasting notes. What does interest me is they say this contains caramelised sugar. Now, that's nothing new. Some British brewers do it. The Belgians do it in a different way. And this caramelised sugar, one brewer, again another Yorkshire brewer that does this quite a lot, is the Sam Smith's Brewery. And in some beers it works, in some it doesn't. You've just got to, if you like that sort of very sweet candy sugar, caramelised sugar, invert sugar, whatever you want to call it, if you do like that flavour, then you're going to like these type of beers. If you're not into that sweet style of beer, you're probably not going to like it. But I am just going to go on what the beer tastes like. If it contains sugar, that's nothing new to me. I'm drinking Belgian beer. I'm drinking beer, Sam Smith's beers, which a lot, as I say, have got invert sugar in them as well. So it's nothing new. No alarm bells yet. So with that in mind, let's get this open and let's see what's going on. Right, there's the cap. It looks like a bushel of barley or wheat or whatever you want to call it. There it is in the collection. Get it in the glass. Yeah, that's dark. Look at that. Now, I've never tasted this before. Never had the pleasure. But as I say, the other beers that they do are really good. So I'm hoping this isn't going to let the side down. What are we getting on the nose? Not big flavours. Not big aromas, but I am getting a roasted malt, slight roasted malt aroma. And that's about all really. The flavours are not, the aromas are not big on this. There it is in the glass. Now it looks like it almost looks like a mild there is a ruby colour to that. You won't be able to see that on the camera, but it's a very, very faint ruby. The head is like a beige, tan, one finger head. And it does look quite nice. The proof is in the tasting, so let's get it tasted. Bottoms up. I have to say the flavours aren't big on this. The body is very nice. I have to say that's quite full bodied. Good mouthfeel on there as well. The finish on this does get quite bitter. There is like an almost coffee-like bitterness to it, but it's very subtle. But I can get that. And that's coming through as you get down the glass. It does remind me a lot of the Landlord. There is the drinkability of the Landlord. I am getting some of the hop bitterness that you do get on the Landlord. There is a little bit more of the bitterness that's lingering around at the end, and it's like a sort of dark chocolate bitterness. But as I say, it's quite subtle. The fruits that they're talking about, I did mention on the back, not really getting that. And they also say there's a fruity toasted aroma. No, I didn't really get the fruits in this at all, to be honest, but maybe that's just my sense of smell. I'm still not getting it now, to be honest. It's just a light chocolate bitterness, roasted type bitterness. That's what I'm getting, and that's about it really, and it's very subtle. It is quite nice. It reminds me of a mild. Now, I've tried milds from the Harvey's Brewery. I've tried milds from the Hook Norton Brewery. And this does put me in mind of them. There's a bit more body to this, I will say. And at 4.1%, the ABV is slightly higher as well. But that's what I'm getting in mind. It's definitely got the drinkability of a mild with a little bit more body to it. But it's not bad, all in all. And to be honest, I'm not really getting that caramelised sugar. That doesn't really stick out at all. Not that I can perceive anyway. This is about cellar temperature, I'd say, in this room. And it's not the massive flavour fest that I was expecting. And that's slightly disappointing. I thought this was going to be, you know, quite big flavours, almost like a dark bitter, or maybe even an old ale. You know, have them big malt style flavours in them, and you know, a long lingering finish. But it's more reminiscent of a mild, in my opinion. The fruits that they're talking about, I just can't get that. No, it's just about that bitter finish. That's a cross between like hot bitterness and like a dark chocolate bitterness, roasted malt type finish on it. But I have to say, it's really drinkable. Quite a good session beer. I prefer the Landlord to this than, the Landlord Dark. But this isn't bad. If they'd have called that a mild, I would have said, I don't suppose they could call it a mild with the ABV, but it is reminiscent of it, and a very good mild at that as well. So yeah, it's very slightly disappointing for me because it hasn't got the big flavours, but to be honest, that's minor, because what it lacks in massive flavour, it makes up for in drinkability. And that's quite nice. It's a perfect session ale as well. I could quite happily drink that all night. And it's just got enough flavour in there to make me want to keep coming back to it. No, I couldn't see myself thinking, oh, I fancy something. I fancy another type of beer now, because this has got just enough flavour, just enough drinkability in it, and it isn't bad. I will say that. So what's the verdict on Timothy Taylor Landlord Dark? Well, as I said, it's slightly disappointing because of the flavours. They're not as big as I thought they were going to be, which is fair enough. It's quite a nice mild. It does remind me of a mild beer, both in the colour and the flavour. The mouthfeel, I think, is bigger though. And the body is bigger. The mouthfeel is really good, but the body is quite big on it as well, especially for 4.1%. That's, how they've done that. That's pretty good. It's not as good as the Bolt Maker, and it's not as good as the normal Timothy Taylor Landlord, but it isn't bad. What I will give it, I'm toying between giving it an 8.5. Yeah, I think 8.5 is a good solid 8.5, well deserved 8.5. And what I'm going to knock marks for off is there isn't the big flavour that you get, what I normally get with the Timothy Taylor Pale Ale. Now that really is a quality beer. I think because I've had that on draft, that may be, I'd like to taste this on draft to really give it a fair crack at a whip, but you just can't get this stuff down here. You would not believe the aggro I had trying to get this. Eventually I got it from Noble Green, who finally got some in, but Beers of Europe haven't had it for ages, and a whole host, even bottle shops in Yorkshire, had sold out of it as well. So I'm not sure what sort of transition this thing is going through, whether, I know they've rebranded the Ramtan, but I don't know whether that's an irretrievable beer that may disappear. I do hope not, because if you're a fan of mild, you're going to love that, and I quite like mild. So yeah, and that is a good one. In fact, that's one of the better mild type of beers, even though you could arguably just call this a dark ale, because that's all it is really. That's the only way you can really describe it. The ABV is a little bit too high for a mild, in my opinion. Anything over 3%, 3.5%, you're pushing it if you're going to call it a mild. 4.1, they can call it what they like, a strong mild if you like. Fucking oxymoron there. But it's quite nice, I have to say. Yeah, it's perfectly drinkable. A good solid session ale. Yeah, I think 8.5 is fair, but I'll reserve judgment. I may have to revisit that, because I want to try and seek this out on draft and give it a fair crack at the whip. It's what I've done with Bolt Maker, and it's what I've done with the Landlord Pale Ale. So 8.5 out of 10, definitely recommend it, and if you're a fan of mild, you're going to love that. And remember, beer is working class champagne.